Okay, guys, just give me a thumbs up. Can we start? Okay, okay. So what we'll do is that, so once again, good evening to everybody. Can you see my screen? Okay, okay. We'll have to go to office. Not so excited. Good, 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 good. Okay. So we'll start today's session, and we have very few slides for the next phase of our session, but we'll keep this as more enriching, more story oriented, and more fun. So once again, welcome to everybody. Hope your Zach went well, and all of you are having a once again. I'm meeting you after New Year, wishing you a very happy and prosperous New Year. Let all good vibes be with you forever and ever. Uh, so today's session is going to be slightly long as well as slightly short. It's a beautiful dichotomy here. So we'll start with what are the overview of today's sessions, and we'll try to understand how the sessions are structured, and we'll go part by part. So before jumping on to this session, before jumping on to this session once again completely, I would be giving a small summary of what we have done so far, so that where we stopped the last time, and that would be the continuation from today's session till independence. So that would be the overall construct. And today's session predominantly will be focused. So before jumping into it, to set the context, today's session will focus completely on from the first war of independence to till 1947. So this is how it has been broken into pieces. But if you look at the screen right in front of you, you might see that some of the years are gone here and here. Say, for example, from 1914 to 1918 would be one stretch, but since 1915 to 1927 has been given as a separate stretch. We'll focus why it has been that way. Probably when we come there, we'll take you through. And one more thing which I wanted to communicate to you all is, please feel free. Please relax yourself. Don't by heart the dates. The dates are not required. All that is expected as a peaceful conflict from you is to understand how far we have come so far and what are the major trigger events. So that is the second background which I want you to have at the back of your mind. And next, at the end of today's session, and today's during all sessions, we'll try to find out some events which has happened in the past, has also repeated today, especially during the pandemic. So we'll just try to link, and so that you also get a chance to think in those directions and appreciate history for what it stands. And on. Okay. So with this context, let's jump to the session. So overview of session like last time, what you will not learn today is drive and dates of information. We'll just have some years to get a overline underlying of timelines. We will not understand what the conspiracy theories are, but we will do try to understand certain concepts which across the historians have been debating for quite a long time, especially near the independence era, and not to engage in any of the what about across social media platforms. So what you learn today again is to understand how we have come so far and having some good fun time with history. So oh, you guys, can you hear me now? Is it better? Is it audible? Great, 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 great. Thank you so much. And I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry for that. So, introduction. Where did I stop? Did I stop in slide 3, or where did you cut? Can somebody tell me where did I? Okay, 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 okay. Slide 3. Thank you so much, Minor. Thank you, Swarna, Deep. Thank you. Okay. Uh, okay. So what you will not learn and what you will learn is what we were trying to understand. We will not learn some dry events and unnecessary engagements in social media. And what we will learn is how we have come so far and ensuring that we have so much knowledge. I know it's 9 o'clock post dinner history. It's dry, but we'll try to make it as much as fun as possible. We want you to be as much as interactive as possible. So to go back, as I was saying earlier, we will start with a quick. We'll start with the recap of as to what we did. What we did. Can you hear me now? Okay. 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 Great. Great. Sorry for that. Okay. So what we have done so far is that we started with yes. I'm not far away. What I was trying to do is that take a walk and talk. Unfortunately, that is not working. What I'm really sorry, guys. Okay, so we'll start with the session now. So stop me, drop a message the moment if my voice is fading off. So now, okay, so let's start with a quick recap. So from 1498 is what from 1498 is what we saw from the last session. So we were trying to understand what all trade happened, how Europeans entered the subcontinent, and how few paths lasted long while others crippled and went ran away. So that segment has been covered. And in today's session, what we'll be covering is that we'll try to understand what has happened from 1850s to 1947. So that is the context. Guys, can you hear me? I'm so nervous. Are you able to hear me? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Okay, first we'll start from 1850s to 1900. So this part of the transformation is pretty important because it set the base. So just brushing up and refreshing your memory. In the past, when the Europeans came for trade, we all knew that the British were established their biggest empire post Battle of Plassey after defeating all the local rulers. So what happened is that as and when the British started consolidating their power in the subcontinent and in India, the people were not liking the British rules, and there were a lot of fissures that were coming up against the East India Company. So what was actually happening? So when the after the trade happened, see the one thing what actually happens is that guys don't read the slide and take notes. I want you to think, correlate, nudge yourself to think in a different direction. These are mere facts as hints. Please try to correlate. We'll come to this point. So, what is the objective of trade? The objective of trade, when two countries go for a trade, it is always a fair proposition when both the countries get mutual benefits and advantages. Correct? That is the objective of trade. But what happens is that when certain countries go for a trade, they focus only on a single. It is like a one-sided relationship or one-sided affair, which we can say, where only one party was taking in a lot of benefits and the other party was completely drained. So typically, when the Brits came to India, the same thing happened. So what happened is that there was a lot of economic crisis which was happening. There was too much of taxation on the locals. So imagine British are in India, they're taxing the locals, and all the revenues and the products goes to the colonies of the British. So it is clearly a skewed advantage for the British. And what happens is that all the products, all the raw materials. So ideally, what should happen? Say, for example, if you take a product, the raw material where it is sourced on the total value chain, the manufacturing of the product where the raw material is available, and then exporting to some other countries or some other places is more beneficial than exporting the raw materials and importing the finished goods. Guys, are you getting it? Just send me some thumbs up, some indication saying, are you getting it or are you missing something? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Works. Okay. So what was happening is that so when this was happening, the one-sided affair was taking up in a big side surge, and it had a detrimental impact on all the other industries. So the Indian subcontinent was known for its handicrafts and the silk, the cotton. Across handlooms and everywhere, India was facing a downside. And politically also, post Battle of Plassey, what happened is that there were small rulers who were present in the country. but unfortunately, none of them were strong enough. So what the British did, and the Indian rulers were also more fighting with one another. That tendency was still there. There was no concept of unity even at that time. Even after this much has happened, rulers didn't realize that something had to happen and control the British. And eventually, the British also started interfering in the local population and controlling the religious activities, etc., etc. And next being military. So what happens is that when the British hired Indian people or people from the subcontinent for their army and the policing, etc., these people were used to attack Indians. So in short, Indians were recruited by the British to control Indians. And what happened is that even in that army, there was a lot of discrimination. And what happens is that an Indian soldier got paid very less compared to the British soldier, and there's a lot of discrimination which was happening. So that was also a completely morale pushing point. So I'll pause here for a minute, take you through a completely different note, and I'll come back to you. See, once you start getting into your B schools and once you start getting into your work, irrespective of any industry you get into, there are some fundamental frameworks which you would be working on. One such fundamental framework is called the PEST analysis, or what we call it as political, social, economical, and technological factors. So this is a framework which helps to understand any situation as to how these are evolving or what are the present circumstances. So if you look at through the history and if you keep fixing this framework and looking at it, we can experience a beautiful transformation of the society has happened. So what we are trying to do here is that we are doing the same thing. We are trying to understand what is the economical framework at that point of time. It was very low. There was no political interference. So imagine a country or imagine a place being ruled like this. It would be a complete chaos. So this is what was happening in the beginning of 1850s. Okay. Now what happens is that, okay, so all this thing slowly mounted, and it resulted in the first revolt of 1857. We all have heard about this from time again and again. It is also called as the First War of Independence. So what happens is that uh, all this socio-economical changes, the pressure given by the British on the local people, the downside of the economy, and the lack of leadership all resulted in a sudden uprising, which happened when the soldiers were asked to peel off the the bullet in the rifle, and it started. It led to the guys, are you able to hear me? Yes, Mangal Pandey, Manu. Yes, Mangal Pandey, the same thing. So it happens, and it resulted in a sudden uprising, and it started off across the northern part of the country, Delhi, Lucknow, Jhansi, Bihar. We have had some of the bravest rulers like Rani Lakshmi Bai from Jhansi, and they started fighting, and slowly the local people also started participating in this. And eventually, what happened? Two things happened. So I want you guys to think about when such event happens. The British had a very good army, and in fact, correlating with the previous session, remember all the treaties when the British signed with the local rulers, they wanted to have the army at each and every checkpoint. For example, after the War of Marathas, what happened is that a treaty was signed to keep the armies in the western region and in the eastern region. Okay, so when the war started, when the uprising happened, moving of army from one corner to the other corner became very easy. So such revolutions or such activities were suppressed. Now, is it right to call this as a first war of independence? We'll discuss this at the end of the session. Okay. And next, this was not a major success, but it was a significant step towards independence. The reason is this was only concentrated in the northern part of India. So I want you all to take a minute, pause, think about it. Anything which happens only in certain section does not result in a complete transformation. So what happened is that this was focused only on the northern part, and about not even it had reached the Deccan region. So what happened is that the full scale participation in this revolt didn't happen, and the movement easily started getting fizzled out. So in short, from 1850s to 1900, what was happening is that these were the changes which were happened during the first war of independence of the revolt of 1857. And after this revolt of 1857, there's always this kind of a liberation after any kind of event, something like this happens. We'll see what those kind of changes which happened post to this. I'll give you guys a minute. Give any questions if you want to ask something or if you want to say something, feel free to put your points. We'll take few seconds before jumping on to the next slide. Wasn't it pork, Surit? Okay, on a lighter sense, Surit, is this what the doubt you really had? Come on. Okay, Anisha, lack of coordination, absolutely. Lack of coordination, lack of unity, I would say, and concentrated focus of struggle. Exactly. It's a sepoy mutiny, not even in all sections of the thing. Exactly. And what is the meaning of question mark in the bracket? Question mark in the bracket is just to nudge you to think first war of was it really a first war of independence? So right now you've got some way, right now you've got an idea of what actually happened. So I want you to think, is it really the first war of independence or it is just like yet another protest? And the second question mark across North India. So I want you to think about from the present context. If government wants to bring up any initiative, imagine if I'm just putting some hypothesis, if government wants to bring some initiative or plan, if it is not uniform and if it is just put at a particular place, what happens? Think about it. Don't give me an immediate answer. Think about it. What would happen? So think of a policy, and if a policy has to be implemented across from Kashmir to Kanyakumari and from Gujarat to the Gairo Hills, what what is needed? So that is what the government calls, and all of us should call it as cooperative federalism. Anisha, I didn't understand. Could the lack of communication technology? No, Shivam, it is not about communication technology. So what happened at that point of time? If you look at it, the British wanted, so much uprisings, everything was happening, and the Mughal Empire was also declining. So some kind of a senior power was required to handle this completely, and there was no direction. Everybody felt we need to, you know what? It is in simple terms. If I have to answer your question, it is like, we come to college, we go to school. So in college, suddenly we feel that, we don't want to listen to this prof anymore. Okay. And the only objective is that we don't want to listen to this professor anymore. But if you look at it with that objective, everybody would be going in every other direction. Somebody would go to a date, somebody would go to canteen, somebody would sit in a library, somebody would just go to the room and sleep. Okay. So lack of clear directions and coordination. Okay. Anisha, demonetization point will touch post independence. Just to put a point on a lighter note, even Muhammad bin Tughlaq did demonetization, if you look at history. But everything had its reason. Let's not mix up this and here and confuse it. Okay, guys. So let's move to the next question. Now, next part. Yep, lack of leadership. You're absolutely right, Mike. So, folks, are you able to, is the pace okay? Are you able to get it, or do you find some kind of a disconnect? Is there any difficulties which you are facing? Quick thumbs up, thumbs down, any reaction? Okay, thank you. Yep, you're right, Arnav. Voice is attenuating. That's a nice word. Thank you, Swarndeep. Okay, so the first part, what we saw was the revolt of 1857, which was happening. Right now, let's try to understand what was happening globally and what it has its impact in India. So the objective of this slide will give is to take you very quickly and in a short and sweet possible way as to what was happening across the globe and how that had equal impact on India. So at the end of the slide, you will understand the key events, how the Indian impact had happened, and we will also understand that even in present day context, whatever happens across the globe has its equal impact on India. That is the reason why the external affairs keeps traveling. That is the reason why the external affairs ministry and the PMO keeps an eye on what's happening outside, and all our policies are shaped accordingly. We'll touch all these points in the late stage, but I just want you guys to have this thought and start thinking in this direction. Okay, what was happening in India? So first of all, 1850 to 1900, if you look at it, what was happening in the Europe? In around 1774, the American War of Independence would happen. In fact, it's quite funny, people say that America fought for independence. In fact, America didn't fight for independence. Independence was given to them because they had control it most of the time. So the spirit of Renaissance was also coming up. So all these ideals were started changing, and India, some of the Indians were also traveling abroad. So what happens is that they understood what was happening in the other countries, and that gave a biggest perspective for them. See, thinking, and by default, when they compare situations back at home, they felt very bad about it. So society, in short, a lot of superstition was there. There was no better position for women, a lot of inferiority complex. In fact, it's quite appalling and excruciating at some point of time, because we still consider ourselves inferior. I'm not trying to stoke or purge upon anything here, but just think about it, as to why should we feel inferior about something. This is across all humanity. So that, and constant suppression by British has always trained, by the colonial past has always conditioned us in a particular way. So that was a big problem. We were not able to accept certain things. And in spite of all those things, there were some kind of changes which were happening in the city, in the subcontinent, like abolition of sati, polygamy ban on polygamy, early marriage act. These were kind of the changes which were happening. So how was this happening? In short, and in a very short manner, they were leading reformists like Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and the Ramakrishna movement. So all these concepts, they started making the point saying that humanity is more important, and it laid facts on how tradition can help to progress in a different way. And the fundamental problem with all these movements were these were all intellectually simulating and had a dose of philosophy and humanitarian aspect. But since the society was not ready to accept all these kind of things, the change took even more lot time. So just pause and think about it. People come for trade. After coming for trade, they establish their biggest empire in the subcontinent. They kill the soul, they rip it apart, fabric by fabric, and it pulls the overall energy. And when some change happens, the existing conditions at that point of time prevents people from changing or adopting to change. So I hope you're able to see this in a big canvas. So keep this, because as we move further in our next sessions also, we will be keep referring to the earlier stage, because it is very important in 2020 and 2021 to understand how we have come up from those days. Because it suddenly, when we look at all things, it always pushes us into a sense of uh, critical of everything. See, it is good to be critic, and there is always a fine line of difference between being critical and being critic, and the societal fabric plays a major role. So keep running these thoughts on the back of your mind on the canvas. So I'll stop here for a minute. Any questions, any points, feel free to put it. No questions, all okay? Okay. So another major important change what was happened from that time. Guys, are can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Okay, okay, okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I think there are no questions from the side. So if you look at it so far, what we have seen is The revolt of 1857 happened, and somebody mentioned that there was no collective leadership, and then the changes in the society. So 1885, something drastic happened. The Indian National Congress was started in it. Look at this group picture way back in 1885. It was started by A.O. Humes. So the main concept was that the British felt that a collective body was required to keep Indians, at check, as well as to ensure that their interests are represented. Now, the very first group which came to all these parties were called as moderates, and they always believe in the philosophy of consensus-based approach, constitutional process, and they also believed and they also wanted to convey a message saying that if we communicate constantly to with the British and tell them explain our conditions properly, they will do something good for India. It was a myth, but at that point of time, they felt this very strongly believed in their thought process. So this was one of the major political. This was a major collective setup which happened. Now, when Indian National Congress was founded in 1885, there was something which historians even today speak of something called as a safety wall theory. It is not a conspiracy theory, but if you look at so far, most importantly, from trade to the First War of Independence or the Revolt of 1857, it was the East India Company which was handling all the affairs. After 1857, it was a crown which took the direct control. So when crown took the direct control, historians started debating the point, saying that why would a crown or her majesty, her or his majesty, wanted to suddenly have more representation? See, let's think about this way. Imagine daily we have some issues we keep telling to somebody and there is no reaction. Suddenly somebody comes and gives us more power to vent out our thoughts. How do we feel? We really feel good about it, right? And we think something is being heard. So historians call it as safety wall theory. They thought if everything is coming directly to British, they felt at some point of time that it is going to hurt them. So they said, you know what, let's create a team, make them feel good about it, and we'll continue to hear them. At the same time, we'll not continue to listen to them. So this was the one. It's not a conspiracy theory. I want you guys to read about it sometime later, not now, but have this in a point of time because after close to 300 years. So if you look at it, when the Europeans came to India, it was around 1498. Uh, uh, from 1498 to 1855 is what a collective representation happened, and between this, an empire had completely gone for a toss. So the Mughal Empire collapsed, all the regional plays went off. So think from all those lens. I'll give a minute for here to pause and then we'll go to the next slide. Any question? The British did unite India. So, Sumit, yes, there is that fact which is always there. He was, more sympathetic towards Indians, and that it was created. So I agree to your point. We don't know. We really don't know. Probably it would have taken another 200 years, but just I'm taking a very cautious approach here. We really don't know. I don't know the answer to the second part of your question. Uh, Volve, the VALVE Shakti, where the British is better than the Mughals for India. If they united us in a different way, and who asked this question? Aniket, hold this question. I'll answer this question in the last. So just ask me the same question at the end of the session. Great. So we'll move forward. Okay. So now, so far we have seen till 1900s. Now we'll try to understand what happened from 1901 to 1914. So slightly it starts getting heavier from here. So I would like you to pay some attention and have even more interactions so that it is helpful to everybody. So what was happening globally? If you look at it, the industrial revolution, those changes were happening, and the countries how they were governed, the structures were being laid upon. And Japan emerged as one of the very strong industrial power, and a very significant psychological boost happened. Japan fought a war, and it won the war against Russia in 1905. So when all people in subcontinent came to know about it, it gave them very big sense of self-confidence that we can also aspire and fight against all this colonial powers. So what was happening, I want you to relate with the previous slide. So if you remember in the previous slide, I was mentioning about a bunch of folks called as the moderates who wanted everything slowly, consensus building, democratic process, all these things. So what was happening is that when all these changes were observing, a new kind of a group started coming in who were called as the extremists. So what happened is that these people were not happy with the progress made by moderates. So in short, moderates, so say for example, if I was a moderate and I had to go to a British and explaining, I'll go to him very politely and explain the situation with all the documents and speak about rules. Whereas extremists were clear on saying that solution is not coming, so we need to hit them or Japan. It's not Japan overthrew which power. Japan had a fight with Russia and it won. Okay, there is a point here from Arnav. Arnav, in that sense, both were ruling us, right? So Mughals came. If you look at the medieval history from a contextual viewpoint, they came as they came to invade and they ruled. If you look at the British, the same thing happened. Did I answer your question, Arnav? And Utkarsh, okay, extremist mean okay, fine. Moderates were kind of people who wanted everything follow a process of build consensus. If there were 10 people, they wanted to take everything as per process, and they were very humble to to put it, and they wanted everything to go listen to them. Uh, Aniket, reserve that for now. So those were kind of moderates to exactly. Exactly. They wanted to go by rules. They don't want to deviate anything because they trusted the British administration. And in fact, they trusted them so much that they thought that we should go and explain them back in UK. Probably the rulers here are not communicating to their people back at the home. And that is the reason our conditions are good one. The conditions are thing. Okay. Bal, Pal, Lal. Aren't they extremists? I don't know if that's a homework for you. So who were extremists? Extremists were people who were like who wanted to revolt, who wanted to break down all these things, and who wanted change very quickly. So what was happened? So interestingly, in this point of time, from 1901 to 1914, there was a major event which the British wanted to play around with the subcontinent. There was an event called Partition of Bengal. They wanted to. So if you look at the pre-independence era, Bengal was a part. Bangladesh was also part of Bengal. So 1905 Ranit it was. So what happened is that they wanted to split it on communal lines because one particular community was higher in one particular section. So people were not happy about it, and moderates thought we should communicate this to the British so that they'll understand. Whereas extremists of the thought process that what they are doing is communally dividing people, and we need to hit them back at the right place. So what they were trying to do is that all these extremists were youth. They had a lot of energy. They preferred bombing and murder than talk. So this was the kind of the aggressive methods which were happening. So again, I want you all to think about how the society has come. Something which was going very normal, the changes which happened outside, and suddenly the violence part starts coming in because of the look for quick answers and solutions, because we were losing time. In fact, just to spill the bean and let the cat out of the bag, in 10 years from 1914, US had already reached its economical power and it faced its first depression in 1930. So we were losing time. So I'm pausing here for a minute, and I want you to give questions or whatever. If you have doubts, we'll answer and then we'll go forward. Suhrit, that's on the next slide. Anisha, are you sure this is about Black Lives Movement? In fact, since you brought that point, it's a homework for everybody. So I want you all to read about this Black Lives Movement, what it is. And mm, I don't know, I'm not able to quantify that, Anisha. The reason is the same Black Lives uh, movement happened way back during Obama's administration. So, and it happened during last year. So spend some time to read. You'll understand what was the cause to happen it. Uh, Similar on certain extents, but we cannot completely say it was on the same line. Did I answer your question, Kashyap? So because of extremist violence started taking place, I wouldn't say it is violence. Because of extremists, the revolutionary activity started increasing. Yes, Ranit. Great Depression started in 1930. Imagine the reason for putting that point right now is a country had achieved independence, a country had grown up so fast, and it had its major economic downturn in 1930. Whereas here we are fighting for our own independence. So just to put that in perspective, I spoke about Great Depression, nothing else. Did I answer your questions? Can people, those who raise questions, give some feedback? It would be helpful for me also to understand if I'm missing something or am I not answering to the point. Pranit, I didn't say it is. I didn't say it is fast. The problem is just to put a perspective from 1770s. I think Pranit, is this is with reference to US, right? Yes, yes, yes. Uh, from 1498 to 1900s versus 1776 to 1900s. Think about in that aspect, Pranit. Anisha, yes, yes, yes. Anisha, in fact, you have used a very beautiful line, falling on deaf ears. Fortunately, when we'll come to the next few slides about certain leaders, they use the same term to bomb everybody. That nobody was listening, talking to them was like talking to deaf ears. We'll come to that point. Yes, you're right. It was based only on religion, Aniket, because they found out that it's very easy to play that card, and that is how it started happening. In fact, going forward, we'll also understand how the thoughts, in fact, the partition of the Bengal was the first, taking an extremely critic aspect. The partition of Bengal was the first experiment by the Brits to see how the people are reacting. In fact, very surprisingly, some people accepted it in those days. So that's for a different point. That discussion is for. I mean, this point is for a discussion, but just have this to have a perspective. Why did they accept it? So it's a very philosophical solution. It's like, feeling at home. If I induce fear in you, saying that, if you don't get 99.99, you will not get into a school and you will not have a future. Exactly. So that fear psychosis helped them, and they capitalized on it. In fact, Okay, I'll just give a small point here. Wherever the Brits have gone, wherever the Brits have gone and colonized the European powers, and when they left a particular country, they have made a big mess everywhere. It is everywhere. It would be either based on the religion or the class and different metrics. So the plot which they plotted in the subcontinent was on religion. Ranit, yes. Anisha, yes. Us versus them, rather it is. So yes, you're right. Okay, so let's move forward. Now, what we'll try to understand here is what was happening between 1914 to 1918. So, if you look at it, at that point of time, the World War had started, and when the World War had started, it had its impact everywhere. And we'll also try to understand what was the impact on Indian subcontinent and how things were changing. So Britain and its allies were fighting with Germany, the AH Empire, and the Turkey. And as it goes, the moderates in India supported Britain. They said we should support Britain because they'll be kind to us. That was one way of thinking. And the extremists still didn't want to support. However, they thought that if we support them, they will do something and do us something in getting freedom. And which didn't happen. All of us know here. And they all patched up after differences. So both were at a different ideological thought process, and they started patching up their differences. Now, I want to have a question which I'm throwing you. What happened during this lockdown in Congress Party? I'm just trying to connect history to the present situation so that we can appreciate the fact that history repeats itself. And at most of the times, and at times, which happens mostly, we fail to learn it properly. Can somebody give me an answer to that question? Swarnadeep, what was it in short? Exactly. So there was a tiff between the. It's not about strong leadership. It's always between the young versus the old guard. Yes, 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 yes. The same thing. Okay. So we'll try to focus that. What we'll try to understand is that keep this thought at the back of your mind. What happens is that the same trend continues post independence also, which we'll be covering in the later session. Why the cycle is happening frequently. Okay. Yes, 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 yes. You're right, Arnav. Utkarsh, let's not get into speculation because few speculations have not materialized into reality. Gabbar Singh, I wouldn't comment on this at this point of time. For the same reason, what is the reason? Renit, can you just take it once again? Yes, 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 yes. You're right. You're right. There was a big ideological difference between Gandhi and Subhash Chandra Bose. Subhash Chandra Bose was very aggressive on certain thought process. He wanted few things to be implemented, whereas Gandhi was very, uh, he wanted more time to get few things done, and he wanted to go slow. So that's it. I would say it was more of lackadaisical thought process. Okay, guys, let's go further. So what happened after the World War? If you look at it, so all this happened, and so Indian soldiers were also part of this uh, World War saga. Okay, so when they fought outside the countries and when they came back, they were disappointed not that the war happened or all these things, but when you see an outside country and when we come back to our own country, we understand what is the major difference. And none of the promises which the British made were adhered. So there was a big disappointment for the Indian people. Next, what happened is that the British were using our own resources to fight for them, which internally used to control us. Read that second line once again, and we'll take few seconds before we jump on to the next section. Any questions, any points, any thoughts, feel free to put in. Numbers are always debatable, but 1 million sepoys from where? From India? Yep, they were weakened. Gabbar Singh, who are you referring to as they? Anisha, yes. Yes, 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 yes. Exactly, Arnav. You're absolutely bang on. You're right. You're right. Domestic sources, as in our domestic resources, labor, land, food items, everything. Arnav, in fact, the colonial powers, Brits were fighting for the freedom. Brits were fighting not for freedom. In fact, they were fighting to secure their colonies by being captured from the other colonial powers. Yes, Utkarsh. British rivals in India were extremists. Moderates were also rivals. The word extremist is used to give a more aggressive tone at which they went against the British administration. Okay, we'll go further. So the most important thing which happened is by a gentleman named Gandhi, who was in South Africa practicing law, and he came to India around nine. He came to India by 1915, and so I'm pausing here to recapitulate something. So far, if you looked at the society, all the movements which were happening were concentrated movements and concentrated struggles. So after Gandhi came, these kind of movements took a different tenure based on his experience in South Africa. He started taking the time and to understand what kind of things can be done in India, and he started doing all those things. Now, with that note, let's get into this slide. Okay, so when Gandhi came in 1915, for the first few years, he didn't do anything. He precisely stayed, traveled to understand what was happening. So he started his first civil disobedience movement in Champaran in for a satyagraha. So this is for paying the tax for the indigo farmers, and he was very successful. And for the very first time, people saw that even some a different movement, even a different struggle like this can be done without fighting or without throwing tantrums. And next, what happened is that by 1918 he had the first hunger strike for mill workers in Ahmedabad. So the wage increase was required because of the economic hardship during the World War and the impact of which the mills were not able to pay. So Gandhi helped to strike a deal between the workers and the mill owners by taking a hunger strike. The reason for putting this slide is I want you to link with the previous slide and understand. So far we have understood how the World War thing has happened and what kind of impact it had on its the domestic country. So even this had impact on it. So these were the first two major things which Gandhi did. The next, in again immediately 1918, what happens is that the non-cooperation movement for the farmers cause happens, which is called the Kheda Satyagraha. So farmers were asked to pay more taxes, but because of drought, they were not able to pay. So Gandhiji stood by them and helped them strike a deal with the Brits and say that they'll not be paying taxes for some. I want you to correlate something with how the society has been changing post 2000s on this lines. Any activity, any movement, or any work which happens, or any trigger that happens across the farming segment, across the labor workforce, or across the taxation part, that creates a major stir across the country. Keep this point and think how this has been repeating again and again and again in our country. So, getting a lot of questions. Let's look into what are the questions are. Anish, bit difficult. Okay. Guys, can you hear me? I'm really sorry. I don't know what is the problem. Anything we could learn from the British? Yeah, at times it is very difficult, but if there is something, I think punctuality would help us in every aspect, because that is something which, yes, British people, one is the punctuality. Then we can talk about, the way they stick to something what they started. Uh, Look at the infrastructure what they developed, keeping in a very far-sighted thought process. Those things. Uh, can you hear me now? Yes, Rowlatt Act was passed at this time. We'll come to it. So that seditious act was the Rowlatt Act. Chai tea was introduced by the British. Arnab, by any chance, who told me that I love tea? Okay, yeah, they did it. Okay. So what happened is that in parallel in 1918, 1919, the Rowlatt Act was passed, and the Gandhi didn't like it because it was coming as a nail in the coffin, because Indians supported, the people from the subcontinent supported the cause of the World War One, and British reiterates back in kind by passing the Rowlatt Act, which they didn't like at all. Okay, and next what happened is a very gruesome Jallianwala Bagh incident, and that when this incident happened, Gandhiji gave off his title Kaisari Hind, which was given by the British because of his contribution to the earlier Boer Wars in South Africa. So he gave those title. He said, "I don't want this anymore." And Rabindranath Tagore also renounced his knighthood, which was given to him. So these are the changes which happened. But interestingly, when the Jallianwala Bagh incident happened, what also equally happened is that uh, General Dyer, who was responsible for this, he was called back to Britain because he was becoming a major embarrassment to the British government. Okay, but interestingly, there was this poet Rudyard Kipling, where we would have heard about him a lot. He said he supports the act of General Dyer, and he did a fundraising for him for all his pension. Though the British openly didn't condemn his act, they, in a very soft manner, they told that he would be recalled back for his actions. So that sends a very wrong precedent, and the message. Just, I think few years back when UK Mayor, London Mayor Sajid Khan, if the way I'm pronouncing his name is correct, he was in India. As will Britain apology for what it did. He gave a very diplomatic answer to it. So that was something very cruel, which happened at that phase of time. And next, what happened is that in the World War, the Turkey was against the British camp. So what happened is that uh, the Turkey had their religious caliphate, which the Muslims across the globe respected. So since the British won the war, they disassembled Turkey, and they were not listening to the Muslims about why the caliphate should be reinstated. So that was a major setback, and because of which Gandhiji wanted use this as a uh, base, and also tried uniting the two communities together, and a non-cooperation movement was started. So what happened is that when the non-cooperation movement was started, eventually it started gaining violence. So in a small incident in 1922, in a Chauri Chora incident, a violence broke out, and an entire police station was burnt. So Gandhiji cancelled the non-cooperation movement. So this had equal ramifications. On one side, people were pissed off that he called off a movement. The other side, Gandhiji was of the very clear fact saying that um, something people have not learned about protesting without violence. So I'm canceling this. Probably his moral compass was on a very high side, but this had an equal issues down the lane. So summing it up, so far, if you look at it, somebody was talking about, lack of leadership. So Gandhiji was, though we all have our own reasons for adulating him or loathing him, there was a kind of a silent back end leader who was doing something to organize the public into a different league. So when all this constructive thought process was happening within the society, what was also happening is that the revolutionary association started coming in. One such thing is the Hindustan Republic Association. So the objective of this association is to just create revolutionary, throw bombs, in the legislative assembly. In fact, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev Rajguru, one of the major events for which they would be hanged was to, throw bomb, and they used the phrase, "We threw a bomb in the legislative assembly" to make sure that the deaf ears listen to what we had to say. So from 1915 to end of 1927 and 1931, these were the major events. So summing it up, the society which was having a very laid back approach and didn't have any masala, suddenly there was the soft masala and then the spicy masala which was getting added up. So we'll have to wait and watch as to how this turned out down the line. So I'll take a moment to answer your questions. No, role attack on that day was because press was coming up on those days. Utkarsh, I'll answer your question. Wait. So press was coming up on those days. So the British didn't want any kind of revolutions coming up. So anybody who had any kind of a newspaper, those people were arrested. So that was the kind of a seditious acts which they were passing. When I say masala, what I mean, look at it. Somebody said sometime back the entire movement was a laid back movement. It is like, when you buy a pani puri and the very first time you eat the pani puri in the evening when the fellow opens the shop, the masala is slightly, it's just getting sunk. It was just, it's just getting ready. But as you go by around 7:38 in the evening to the same pani puri guy, the spice would have increased slightly, and all this imli, all this starts getting into it. So that's the difference between the normal masala feel and the one which comes up down the line. Oh, thank you so much, Sahid. Arnav, that was a real charge. That was not a fake charge by the British. So, in fact, what was even more pressing for the public is that people believed what Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, Rajguru did was the right thing, and Gandhiji didn't support or stand in the negotiations to to help the release of Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, and Rajguru. Anisha, you can swig it. The options are still open. Okay, guys. Any more questions, or can we go ahead to the next one? Okay, we'll go to the next one. Okay, so the next is slightly rapid one, and also a lot of events which have happened. So till now, if you look at it, a lot of divisions, multitude of thought process happens. Now post 1928, all the trial movements which Gandhi did and how the society was unfolding, it led to major change, also certain discomforting moments. So what happens is that, so if you look at in the previous slide, uh, certain kind of a momentum has been prepared. So some of the things which the Indian officials were kept asking to the British is that we need something for our own. You cannot continue to treat us this way. So what happened is that in 1928, just as a carrot and stick theory concept, the British said, let's send a commission to see how we can give constitutional arrangements for India. Unfortunately, Congress protested that because that commission, called the Simon Commission, did not have any Indian in this entire thought process, in this entire process. So the point which was put forth is, how can you bring something for us without even having any of us in the first place? So
till now the goal of Congress was Swarajya, Purna Swaraj. Uh, and there was also talk of a lot of intermediate transitions. But after this, they were also equally pissed off and they said, you know what, let's go for complete independence as the complete goal. So the entire requirements also started changing significantly. Now, what happened is 1930, Gandhi again, once again, gets into a mode of satyagraha to again prep up and say that they are not happy with the ruling administration. So the Dandi March happens, and what happens is that a lot of roundtable conferences happens where it doesn't things don't go really in favor of Congress, because what happens is that in the roundtable conferences, when Gandhiji sits there and he says that he represents the interests of a country, the British didn't accept it because all the princely states at those point of time and all the minorities were also there who had a different thought process. So whatever points which were put forth during any kind of negotiations with all the moderate people, nothing emerged. It just appeared as if the time is going, but nothing actually happened in place apart from deliberations and discussions and coming back without nothing. And eventually, what happened is that the global scenario was also changing, and the World War II broke. So, world history, let's not touch at this point of time. But in short, if we have to summarize, the seeds were World War II were sown in World War One for the territorial ambitions of the countries. So the treaty of Versailles, and how Germany, the way they were treated, and all these things, it was not striking well, and the World War II broke out. And the catastrophe, what actually happened was that Britain, by default, de facto, assumed that India will support Britain for the war. So leaders were not ready for it. But again, Mahatma Gandhi was very clear that we should support them during their difficult times. So what happens is that suddenly, as the narrative also changed, and the government was also pushing more for independence, freedom, saying that assure this is we will support you, and the government was going front and go back on this. But what is very important for us to understand at this point of time is the Pakistan resolution was also passed because of the communal thought process which the British had shown. And the British were the very first time, after all these deliberations, they were offering what we had asked decades back, years back, on the dominion status. And it was like, you know what? And the attitude of the British at 1940 was exactly like how Facebook and WhatsApp showed their attitude few days back in the new privacy policy. Just take it or leave it. So that was the thought process at 1940 by the British, and the government rejected it, saying that that was the last nail in the coffin you did not give. But they were also hard pressed for a solution, because Japan was on the opposite side of the war, and they started reaching towards Myanmar Rangoon region. So the British were equally afraid, and what happens is that they wanted to have some solution with India. They wanted to have a consolation. They wanted to have a offer on the table. Excuse me. Congress rejects everything straight up front, and the Quit India movement starts. So what happens is that in parallel, all the back channel discussions happens with the Muslim League, and there happens a something called as a Waiwal plan, which says that there will be a council where everybody will be Indian except commander in chief. Now everybody gets pissed off and they say, screw you, we don't want any of those things happening. So what happened is that, so if you observe properly, post the World War II happening, the British were also having a pressure as to get into a solution. So when somebody is operating at a pressure, getting into a solution, they'll try to do anything for them to get a solution. Okay, and they were trying every possible thing, and it didn't work out. And finally, in 1947, the Mountbatten Plan happened, and at least statements on transfer of power. We supported the war, finally, as much as possible, and we finally got independence. Now, one thing which I wanted to tell here is, in this entire process, there is always this, say, for example, let's take an example of American War of Independence. Historians always say that, when America came up from Europe, it was a liberal Europe. Europe was very strict, orthodox. America was peppy, wild, wild west. Those 13 colonies on the East Coast, when they settled, they started coming up, and they had all the issues with the British, who were not controlling them, but they had a lot of tax, all these problems. Now, did they really fight for independence, or it was given to them? Read about it. develop a perspective, and just keep at the back of your mind. Now, let's look at what happened with India. So when the World War II happened, the British were equally drained because this was a second war for them. They drained. They spent a lot of money on the wars. They at some point of time they also felt that they were not able to stretch more, and they decided to give it up. And Indians at that point of time wanted to have the most, what is it? They wanted to take most of the advantage of the situation to ensure that we Indians we get freedom from the colonial power. Now, what if the British continued to drag down for even more years? They would have left us in even more mess. We were already in a mess. Now, with all this in mind and with all the pressing, we got a partition, and again, as a twist with destiny, it came finally with a lot of bloodshed, communal holocaust, which nobody expected it would happen. But fortunately or unfortunately, I would close the session and the slide by saying that historically, wherever the Britishers have gone, they've had a messy exits across the globe, and they have created disputes which have not been, you know, sorted for decades, and it is ransacking everybody left, right, and the center. So, summing it up and quickly refreshing it, trade will always result in aggrandizement of power, and if not handled with proper checks and balances, it would result in mere economic imperialism, which downlane will have huge catastrophic repercussions down the lane. And that is the reason whenever any new country is getting into a trade, that we can see a lot of protest, especially the left goes gungu about it, saying that this is not needed, that is not needed. Because everybody remembers this car, and it is equally important for us also to appreciate and understand why something is happening, why a particular group is always protesting, what is the underlying reason for them to protest. Do they believe in something what they stand for, or it is just a part of the entire pandemonium? So think about this. This is all very important, and we want you to think, develop some perspective, because with this thought process, we need to step into the next phase, which is going to be very significant. Because I'm ending it with a note. When they left, we were one of the very poorest country. From we dropped down from one of the world's richest country to poorest country, where the population was not even able to starve its own food. So from this moment of where we were downsized completely to what we are today, that journey is going to be even more enriching. So with this thought, I would close the session and I will take questions from you.
Uh, Abhilash, the last part about trade, what I was saying is when a country comes to trade, what happens is that slowly they wanted to adopt to that particular situation, and they start doing business, and eventually the lust for power always is there, and the economics always plays an imperialism thought process, and they wanted to have more control. And that is the reason when any country comes for a trade, people are slightly apprehensive. One live example which I would like to share with you is the uh, China's entry into Sri Lanka. So if you look at it, what happened is that if you look at the map of Sri Lanka, on the top there was a Malata, if I'm pronouncing it correct, airport, and there was the Hambantota port. So the Sri Lankan government wanted money for infrastructure. The Chinese were also giving them. There was also business going on. So they invested there. Sri Lanka was not able to repay back. And what happened is that China took the lease of that port for 99 years. It public went crazy pissed off about it. And the Chinese are doing this across the globe. So it started with trade. You remember, any trade relationship will always lead into political muscle flexing. Okay, so that is the part about trade. Uh, it, okay, I'll just put some thought onto the point which you have said, because that thought is required for us when we do the discussion forward. So Nehru loves socialism. It had its own pros and cons, and it was a disaster. And I'll tell you why it worked and why it didn't work.
The reason I'm explaining it now is because I want you to get this thought sink in and not come back with blind criticizing of anything and everything. So what happened if you look at it? Some of the countries were following the capitalist economy, where they left it the market to decide. They didn't want any kind of intervention. For example, if we consider, say, Gabbar Singh, you wanted to sell 10 pair of shoes, okay, and there were hundreds of people who are ready to buy this 10 pair of shoes at whatever price you keep, okay. Now, what if Swarnadeep comes into picture and says that, you know what, in these 10 shoes, you should out of these 10 shoes, 4 shoes, you should sell it only to the bottommost people in the pyramid. In the remaining 2 shoes, you should sell only to Barun sir. And the last 3 shoes, you can sell it to anybody and everybody. So this intervention by Swarnadeep is called the control by the country, and it is called a regulated economy. Now, if Gabbar Singh was allowed to sell shoes to anybody and everybody, he will keep making money, and people who want more shoes, they'll continue to buy more shoes, and people who want shoes will always buy shoes. But has it really reached people, those who really need shoes? We don't know. It wouldn't have, because it's completely left to the market, because when the price keeps going up, only those who can afford can they buy. The reason for giving this example is certain markets where certain countries were following this principle, what we call it as capitalism. Now, in all this era, why Nehru loved socialism is that post or towards independence, he kept traveling outside to other countries. He went to Russia and he believed that the planning system, what they use there, is absolutely fantastic, and India shouldn't have a complete capitalist economy, and India shouldn't have complete socialist economy, and we should have a mixed economy. The reason for I want you all to take a moment and listen to this fully, because the same thing will be taken into a deeper level in the down lanes, and though this question is important, I'll put it once again at the later stage, but I'll be setting the context right now since it came up now at the right time. So when he went to Russia, he saw that the planning thing happened very well, and he did it. And the trade point, we just got independence. Imagine if few private companies comes back to India and once again they start establishing their empire exactly like what East India Company did. So we had all good reasons not to embrace capitalism at this point of time. And next, where is the capital for entrepreneurs at that point of time to pump in money and do something? You get it? So that was the reason why Nehru thought socialism would be the right way. Now, the socialism, what Russia did and what we did was like a khichdi. Let's be honest about it. So, what happened is that when socialism was brought to India, government of India focused on something called as a mixed economy or the welfare state approach, where it had control over the strategic initiatives, strategic departments, strategic sectors, and other sectors were left to the private to come up. So, important things were regulated like food, sugar, healthcare, education, whereas all the other sectors were left for the private to happen. But still, it was controlled by the government, like, how many people should enter this industry, how many people should operate in this industry, who should get license, or we call it as a license raj. So that is the reason why socialism was taken, and we went for the planning commission, all those things. So it started off with that intention, but unfortunately, what happened is that we were not as uh, the right word would be, we were not as paced and as pushy forward to get it. Because if you look at the leadership, we had Nehru at the top, Nehru at the top, and after Nehru, nobody knew what was happening. And on a lighter sense, even today in Congress, the same thing happens. Nobody knows what the top leadership is all about, and there was a lag there. Okay, so nobody knew what was happening, and they kept following because he had more ideas and connect with the people. Okay, so this happened, and at the later stage, we realized, and Russia didn't follow pure socialism. It collapsed. Collapsed of Soviet Union had even more impact. Why should we follow something which has already collapsed? So the communism was not working, and all the parties, all the political parties which were working with Nehru, which were working with the Congress party, sorry, which was working with the Congress party, were most of the left thought process, which didn't want any kind of a major uh, market related reforms, because it was always having the back of the mind, because Russia was still believing in communism, China was also still believing in communism. So these kind of churn thought process made sure that Nehru wanted to have a mixed economy at that point of time. At that point of time, it made a right decision, and that is the reason, if you look at it, some of the things which was created at that point of time continues to pain us today. And I will not dig deep into it, we'll cover it later, but I'll just leave it with a thought. Those times, public sector units or the government companies had a lot of were required by the uh, public sector companies were created to generate a lot of employment. These steel companies, everything came with a strategic investment. Say the Bilai came from Russia, all their support and everything. Okay. So what happened is that Soviet Union was divided in 1991, and if you look at it, that is the time when the Gulf War was happening and India's balance of payment crisis happening. And post 1970s, 1980s, if you look at our economic growth rate, it would be going down, and that is the reason some of the left parties stroke their egos by saying it is called a Hindu rate of growth, which some of them don't like it, but unfortunately that is the truth. And we had to pay the price for following the Soviet model. And since Nehru was the founding father of the country in terms of post independence, the Congress didn't want to shift from his ideas and thought process. We'll discuss this later down the line. But coming back to the point on PSUs, so when the public sector units were created in India at those point of time, it was done in the right intention to create, employment, everything. But today, if we look at it, are they as efficient as they were? Be answer is no. The problem is, uh, when we talk about socialism and welfare, the kind for what has happened is that government has restricted competition. Only if competition is there, for example, if 10 people are there in a batch, only if there is a competition, we'll know who is better. So to know who is better, everybody would be performing it at their peak level. So in short, the socialism concept which the government followed in those days didn't give scope for much competition, and as a result, inefficiency, laid back attitude started kicking in, and people took these jobs for government jobs, they pay money, and that is causing damage post 2000 for a country in a big way. And that is the reason post 2014 government has been doing some significant 360-degree policy shift in terms of bringing in, say, the private trains, or bringing in terms of disinvestment, increasing the disinvestment targets, selling of Air India, all these things. We'll touch upon all this later, but I want you all to think on these lines and not get into blind criticisms or points like Nehru loves socialism, all those things. At that point of time, it was required, it was done, period. Now, yep, Azad Hind Army played a major role uh, in independence, in terms of in fact, uh, he speaks from Germany by saying Jai Hind. So it was Subhash Chandra Bose who said it, and that's a very important. Thanks for bringing that point, Arnav. Can we correlate what about with China and RCEP? We'll talk about this later, but I'll just give one heads up on that. If we look at RCEP, let's give a very simple example. For example, Surat, you make cheese in India. Okay, now if Surat makes very good cheese, Surat should have benefits. Surat should be allowed to sell cheese in the markets where cheese is required. Correct. Now, say for example, Surat makes cheese and Gabbar Singh makes pastas. Okay. Now Gabbar Singh tells that I will sell you pastas, but I will not give my market for you to sell cheese. Okay. So the problem for walking out of RCEP is that India wanted access in certain markets, which was not given because China was playing a major role in that. For example, India wanted access into China's IT infrastructure, which they didn't agree, and the trade advantages were not as favorable, and that is the reason India pulled out from RCEP. Now, next important thing which government took a very strategic decision from my limited understanding viewpoint is that already economy was going in downturn because of the collapse in the banking system, and the liquidity was an issue. When I say liquidity was an issue, it means access to business, doing business was a challenge for small industries. And at this point of time, if we open up external markets, what would happen? So earlier, what was the case with the government was having more control. So I am saying this pre 1991 license Raj system may government was having more control and no private industries. Everybody were kept in check. In short, there was no competition. Because of no competition, there was lack of inefficiency in the system, which kept in, and people were complacent with inefficiency in all the sarkari jobs. Let's be honest about it. Okay, now keep that and link it parallel to this. Right now, assume that government says okay to RCEP and a lot of new players come in. So when the economy is not in a healthy position, and when the local business is not ready to take on competition, and if competition comes in, it will kill exactly what was supposed to do in a right way. So in one way viewpoint, what the government did was the right thing, but equally by closing out from RC, what has also actually happened is that when is the right time to get into it? I really don't know. Probably I need to do some reading on it. But if we'll have to wait more, I don't know what is going to happen. So I'm really sorry, Surit. I understood in the other way. Yes. For example, if you look at it, China is constructing all the deep water ports in Bangladesh and Myanmar for the gas pipelines and everything. So if you look at the world map, China is in requirement of deep water ports, and through trade, they want to get control of ports in every other country. Did I answer your question? Yep. Thank you. So any further questions, Ranit? Yes. In fact, he was an unsung hero. Uh, because what happened is that, interestingly, during the balance of payment crisis, uh, the government was in a very bad shape. So the only old guard in the party was Rao Saab, and he, Subramanya Swami's blueprint and Manmohan Singh's documents helped push through this. Yes, it was a very good decision which the government took at that point of time. And answering your question, yes, they were good in that regard to open up and go ahead with the reform process. Any more questions? Okay, guys. So I think it's already 10:30, and good night.